Welcome to the Heartland Journal's Tennessee podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and pass it around. We only grow with your help. Thanks for doing it. On this show, we are focusing on our nation today with an always interesting person making a positive change in our community. We interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with special guest Mark Joseph. Mark Joseph is an award-winning music and film producer, author, columnist, commentator, and founder of MJM Entertainment Group. He has been involved in the development and marketing of some of the biggest films in history, including The Passion of the Christ, The Chronicles of Narnia, Ray, Holes, and 45 other films, and has served as a producer on films including Max Rose, starring Jerry Lewis, The Vessel, starring Martin Sheen, America, Imagine the World Without Her, Japan, Searching for the Dream, and is currently producing the film, well, he already did, Reagan, starring Dennis Quaid, and No Safe Spaces, starring Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla. He is the author of several books, including The Rock and Roll Rebellion, Faith, God, and Rock and Roll, and The Lion, the Professor, and the Movies, and most recently, Rock Gets Religion, The Battle for the Soul of the Devil's Music. He is a regular contributor to USA Today, Fox News Online, and the Huffington Post, and has written widely on politics and pop culture for a variety of publications. Let's check in with Mark. Mr. Joseph, how are you today?
Great to be with you. Thanks.
I'm so glad that you were here in my town. Thankful that you came in person. I actually got to see the premiere of Reagan here in Franklin, Tennessee, with Dennis Quaid in attendance, screenwriter Howie Klausner, Nick Searcy, who played Howard Schultz. So thanks for doing that. What got you interested in Ronald Reagan in the beginning?
That's a great question. I think when I was a kid, for those of us who were 80s kids, Ronald Reagan kind of loomed large over our pop culture. Dennis Quaid says that for better or for worse, he was our dad. Sometimes some things you like about your dad, some things you don't like about your dad. But so he was always kind of looming large out there. And I think for a lot of us, like I said, the 80s, it's Ronald Reagan. And so I'm always looking for a good story. And so I kept waiting for somebody else to do it, and nobody would do it. And so I began to think about it, and I talk about it in my book. I opened the book with this, but I'm driving in the Midwest with my wife, and I'm trying to set the stage of how ridiculous this was. 4 little girls under the age of 6 in a minivan, minding our own business, driving down the road in the middle of the heartland, driving to or from my cousin's wedding. And all of a sudden, we've got flashing lights, and I get pulled over like I'm a criminal, and a very nice police officer comes out and says, "You're way over the speed limit." And I said, "I am. I'm just going like 65." And he's like, "Yeah, but the speed limit's 45." And I'm like, "But it just said 65." So I'm obviously caught in this glorious speed trap. And he's like, "You're so far over the speed limit that you have to appear in court in person. You can't just pay a fine." And I'm like, "You have to be joking. This is like a bad Seinfeld episode or something. I'm going to go to jail or something." He says, "No, you've got to appear. You got to come back in a month." And not to be a smart aleck Hollywood guy, but I'm like, "Can I just please pay the fine and go on my life?" And he's like, No, this is serious. So I finally talked him into letting me come the next day. So I have 24 hours to kill, but I look at the speeding ticket and it says you must appear in court in Dixon, Illinois. And I know that that's Ronald Reagan's hometown. So I realize I'm stuck in Ronald Reagan's hometown for a day, 24 hours. And so I think that was just like the first little inkling that I'm supposed to make a movie about him. Like I'm here against my will.
Forced you to pay
Not
attention.
that it's not a beautiful place, but so I go before the judge the next day. I brought my 4 little kids in for sympathy, but I got no sympathy. And the court person had warned me, if you plead innocent, he could put you in jail. He could actually lock you up. Then there'll be a trial. Again, I'm thinking that last Seinfeld episode, right? So I thought, I probably shouldn't do that in front of traumatize my kids. But I did say, Your Honor, I took some footage of going the speed limit after this happened, so I could show you what happens, because people are flipping me off and saying, "F you, speed up." And so I said, "May I show it to you?" And he just looks at me and he says, "I'm not going to watch your video, son. Guilty or innocent." So at the moment of truth, I lie and say guilty. and I pay my $500 fine. And that's where it all started for me. But in all seriousness,
You wanted to make your 500 back.
500 back, yeah. I have to thank that officer. But in all seriousness, that showed me that day there, really brought home the fact that the great people in our country come from ordinary places. It's a very ordinary place. Nothing against Dixon, but all I could see was a hotel, a gas station, and a Pizza Hut. There's not a lot going on. But that's where our leaders come from. And across the board, think about it, Barack Obama, Richard Nixon, Joe Biden, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, with the exception of the Bushes and the Roosevelts. And, well, Trump, I don't know.
Trump Tower.
Trump's in between.
Yeah.
But everybody else just comes from the heartland and from often broken families, missing a dad often.
Yeah, Clinton for sure. Yeah.
Clinton for sure. Reagan, alcoholic dad. So anyway, it just reminded me like that. This is where our great people come from, and so that's where I got the idea for the movie.
Awesome, Heartland Stories. We love it. Well, the film is based on The Crusader, written by Paul Kengor. Here it is, right here. It's a great book. This is my copy. It's all yellowed. Right. I've had it for a long time. There aren't many books about Reagan actually for being such a transformational figure in history. Winning the Cold War and all. But this book goes into his religion. Ronald Reagan and the fall of communism. Did you find that aspect of the man particularly compelling?
I did. That was really the interesting part to me. He also wrote a book called God and Ronald Reagan. I have a friend who's a religion columnist named Terry Mattingly, and Terry's written for years a weekly column on religion. And Terry often says that religion is often the ghost in people's stories, that if you can't understand that part, you can't figure them out. Just to give you one example, Michael Jackson, Jehovah's Witness, doesn't celebrate Christmas or birthdays growing up. Okay, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I kind of correlate that lack of ordinary childhood pleasures with a person who can't grow up and be an adult and is like perpetually a child. Maybe, maybe not, but I think there's at least a plausible theory there. So things like that if you understand that dynamic, you can understand the person better. And so in the case of Reagan, I have all the biographies of Reagan, and I've been reading them for years, but none of them really, for me, captured the essence. And even his own official biographer, Edmund Morris, he sort of called him inscrutable and threw up his hands and kind of gave up.
Yeah.
And wrote
He did the same thing to Teddy Roosevelt. I didn't like his version. I like this version.
Yeah. The TR book, at least, anyway, with Reagan, he just kind of gave up and he made up a fictional character, and so it became nobody really liked it. And but the point is that he just kind of gave up. But Paul Kengor, very meticulous researcher, published by a mainstream publisher, so he's got his street cred in terms of that world of political biography. But he went to the church that Reagan grew up in Dixon, and he asked the current pastor, "Is there any chance I could see or hear the sermons that young Ronald Reagan heard as a child?" And the pastor said nobody ever asked to see them before, but they're in the basement and you can look at them. Well, think about that for a second. Of all those genius biographers that nobody ever thought to ask that basic question, I wonder what the kid was hearing as a child. What was the input? So not surprisingly, he finds a fairly anti-communist preacher who's, positing or planting a lot of anti-communism into young Ronald Reagan's brain. And that suddenly makes everything make sense. I go, okay, I get it. This kid was like programmed practically as a child to be against communism and the Bolshevik Revolution. And then Paul found that even an anti-communist, a dissident came and spoke at that church when Reagan was 17. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't know for sure if Reagan was in attendance, but likely he was. Mm-hmm.
Played by Kevin Sorbo in the movie.
Played by Kevin, right.
The scenes play out, which is interesting because we also have the experience of Chicago. Oprah and Barack Obama's pastor, who planted obviously seeds in his
pastors
mind.
Are
quite
important.
The opposite. Pastors are important.
Pastors are very important.
Did Paul see it and comment on it? He'd been about 23 at the end of Reagan's term, 1989. Paul Kengor, did he see the movie?
Oh yeah. Paul was very helpful to
it?
us. Yeah. He was very complimentary and gave us good notes along the way. But that was really key. And so once you understand that, and then as far as the religious impulses, Reagan is a very complicated person religiously. On the one hand, in that era, there was a reticence. When Jimmy Carter declared, "I'm a born-again Christian," that was like, whoa, it was kind of jarring. So there was kind of a reticence up until that period to declare your faith like that.
And there was a lot of pushback for John F. Kennedy for being Catholic. A lot
Right.
of people still feared in America that the Pope would run the country if elected a Catholic. So he wasn't that many years later that Reagan was talking about his faith too.
Right. So Reagan was, on the one hand, during his Hollywood years, he attended Presbyterian church and all that, but I wouldn't say, he was like a Bible thumper per se, but his mother was very, very devout. But when he's 11 and a half years old in Paul's books, his mother gives him a book. We think the preacher gave it to the mom and the mom gave it to Reagan, a fiction book called That Printer of Udell's. That becomes a very, very formative book. And Reagan's mother is concerned that her son's going to become an alcoholic like dad and kind of end up, as a ne'er-do-well. He reads the book at 11 and a half and goes to her and says, "I want to declare my faith and be baptized." And her and the preacher, in the movie we have the preacher say, "You can't, you have to wait till you're 12. And it's Disciples of Christ, which is a very strict denomination about baptism. So anyway, that always perplexed me because Reagan said, "I've got to be baptized now." And I'm like, who cares? Can't you wait 6 months? But in that denomination, it's very clear that salvation is linked to baptism. So he didn't want to go 6 months in an unbaptized, unsaved state. So he convinces
Probably had a fear of death coming because of his dad and the alcoholism, falling down in the cold streets. He could have died any second, not be baptized. That would be bad.
Yeah, so he convinces the pastor to baptize him at 11 and a half, and then we're off to the races. But in that book that he had read, the hero becomes a Christian, becomes a youth minister, and then in the end goes off to Congress to become a U.S. congressman. So it's just almost like, with the exception of Congress versus the president, or maybe a senator, he kind of presages his life. So that book was really crucial.
He had his marching orders, and he went for it.
Yeah.
So he was also president of the Screen Actors Guild.
Right.
Why do you think the industry turned on him so much as president, and of course after, not even when he was governor of California, but he was one of theirs, right? I don't remember him doing anything particularly harmful to Hollywood and their studio bosses' interests. So why so much hate for the man?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do know, for years, the political right was accused of paranoia, making up stuff about the Soviets trying to infiltrate Hollywood. But after the wall fell, after the Soviet Union fell, we had the documents. So now we knew they were really trying to influence America through movies. It's not conjecture anymore. The question is to what degree and in what ways, but they clearly wanted to influence scripts. They would work with screenwriters and try to infiltrate and win people over to their side. So they clearly, and also the unions. In the movie, you'll see the unions issue. So again, I don't think it's paranoia to say that they knew that movies are influential and they wanted to be part of the game. There's also some thought that they tried to recruit actors as well. And so I think Reagan was kind of made those plans very difficult because of his activities. And
there's that recent movie, I think it won Best Picture, Hail Caesar, with Clooney, and a lot of them where the dumb actor, so to speak, was very malleable to the Soviet influence, and they ended up going through all that. And of course, we all love 1941, which was really a paranoia that California was going to be invaded from the West.
Exactly. Yeah, of course that was so. But again, it was not paranoia. It was really happening. Yeah. And I believe that, of course, even like the North Korean dictator, the previous father, was a huge movie fan. He was making movies, actually.
Yeah.
So
John Wayne.
These guys understand the power of our movies.
Yeah, and America did it too with John Wayne, of course, and with Reagan.
Right.
But so he was also governor of California, where Hollywood is during that heyday. Let's just say, this was the industry, and he did crack down on the anti-war protests on campuses.
Right.
Cal Berkeley specifically, which is Northern California, not Southern California, where Hollywood is. Did the leftist professors lead the way for the cultural actors to turn on him? Maybe that would be another factor.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that one. In the movie, we have a moment of confrontation with the professors. and he really felt like they were really agitating the young people on. And in the movie, we're not clear about what the issue is about, but at the time it was about a park being built, I believe, up at Berkeley. But it was more symbolic of the greater battle that was going on. What really made Reagan unusual, it's a little bit of the Bernie Sanders factor, that you think these, like Bernie Sanders is kind of old and curmudgeonly, but young people loved him. Young liberals loved him. Same with Reagan. Even though he was way up there in years, he really had a following among young people. And part of it was he really cultivated that. He had a philosophy that once you get past high school, it's going to be hard to reach people and change their minds on things. And so he liked spending time with young people. And I think he crafted his message for a young audience. And
Dennis Quaid said it very well. He was like our father. I was born in 1971. He was literally, even when he got shot, my surrogate father, who died in 1977. So
I think that's really true. Yeah. And also, our own fathers were close to us and imperfect. And Reagan seemed like the cowboy. We didn't know all his flaws because we were just kids, but he seemed like he had it all together. And so I think we were like raised by our own dads and Reagan as the surrogate dad.
If we had one,
again,
yeah.
For better or for worse. But the irony is that, in his own life, in some sense, his younger two kids almost got sacrificed because him being the public figure that he was, he had to be traveling all the time. And so they didn't get... My sense is that the older two got more of their dad than the younger two. Yeah. Mike Reagan talks about, even though they were divorced, he'd get all the weekends with his dad, all to himself. Whereas the younger two, by then, he's governor, he's running for president. He's just not physically there. Yeah. And so I think
similar
they paid...
with Kennedy, similar with Abraham Lincoln. I mean, these guys were the fathers of the country. And
they paid a price. The kids paid a price, I think, for what he had to do. And also, for the longest time, Reagan was afraid to fly. Until he ran for governor. Mm-hmm. So he would take these long, train trips. So you're speaking in Joplin, Missouri or something, instead of flying in and out, you've got a week or whatever that you're away from your family. So I think they paid the price.
All the celebrities who died on airplanes, he was probably just observing, like, I don't think that's the best means of transportation.
His brother comes to him and says, look, if you're going to run for governor, I need you up in Sacramento tomorrow to meet with these rich guys who are going to help your campaign. Like, you got it. I don't know how he did it. I would love to know. This is the one of great mystery of Ronald Reagan, is how he got over his fear of flying. Because he didn't fly for about 20 years. And his daughter asked him one time, what do you do? He says, well, I just pray that, that we'll be safe. But I mean, that's a pretty serious phobia, to not fly for 20 years. And all of a sudden, if he hadn't gotten over that, he could never have reached his destiny.
Like John Madden would never fly, buses only.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Do you think they hated him more for being a Christian or for being a Republican?
What time period are you talking about? As president?
Well, since I'm born and raised California, 1971, I just now, being a Republican myself, always wonder, like, why did they turn on their own guy? And so I'm curious, was it maybe his Christian faith that California doesn't have much of, or was it his Republican, which California didn't have much of either, not just now and then? Yeah,
California was a very different state than it is now. So they voted for him, obviously, for governor twice, for president twice, by fairly large margins.
But the Streisands and the Rob Reiners and the De Niros, all these same people that were there while he was all those stages.
Hollywood really disliked him, in fact, at one point, who was going to play him? Michael Douglas was going to play Reagan in some movie, and some reporter wrote, and I have it in the book, but a reporter wrote and said, Michael was once the head of an anti-Reagan group. That may not be the best person to play him.
Well, Streisand's husband did too.
James Brolin, yeah. So that's a good question. I don't know why. I think just well, I told you recently off the air that I had just done an episode with Gene Simmons of KISS, and even Gene says at the time, I think he was a Reagan fan. So I think we just didn't know. Yeah. The general rule in Hollywood is whoever's quiet probably leans in that direction. Whoever's vocal is vocal usually for the Democratic candidate. A lot of people are quiet during the election season in Hollywood circles. So I think that might be your first tell, is who hasn't spoken out. But I think the nuclear issue was really used as a wedge, that Reagan was a scary, going to pull the trigger, and scared a lot of people. Yeah, and so a lot of anti-nuke marches. Of course, one of them was led by his daughter, Patty Davis, at the time. She marched with them and took a delegation to the White House to meet with him.
And the Jane Fonda family certainly wouldn't have been in favor. So I could see where the top-down sort of driven legendary surviving actors and actresses would be opposed to a Reagan Republican administration. But I just didn't hear a lot of anti-Christian rhetoric, which, unlike Kennedy, that was overt. Maybe it was just subvert. We don't really want to tell everybody that we don't like.
Yeah. I think Reagan comes in after Carter, right? So Carter is the big, I'm born again, and he really popularized that phrase, born again. Chuck Colson, Nixon's hatchet man, wrote a book called Born Again. So Reagan comes after that. And in that context, people were a little suspicious of Reagan's faith. Even the religious right, the Christian leaders, I remember one of them, Adrian Rogers.
Divorced.
That divorce is a big thing, yeah. Adrian Rogers came to him and said, do you know of the Savior or do you know the Savior? It's like, whoa. It's like, that's kind of intrusive. But Reagan's like, no, I know him. I've known him for about 60 years. But that was kind of an ad. They were suspicious of him. Been divorced, Hollywood guy. And so it was almost like he had to prove himself to them.
Yeah.
Like he's auditioning for them. And, they were for many years not politically active, as the Jerry Falwell types. And so they felt betrayed by Carter. And then they wanted to make sure, they're kind of sniffing around Reagan, make sure he was okay.
Yep.
And I think he passed their test in spite of the fact. And he said, look, I didn't want this divorce that happened to me. It was against my wishes and that sort of a thing. So they put him through the ringer.
They did. They sure did. So we see this now, by the way, in Jon Voight, who's in the movie, a Trump supporter, not sure about Dennis, but he seems America first. He's been making movies a long time. He respects his audience, who are Americans, filmgoers. Sean McNamara, Howie, Jennifer O'Neill, who plays his mom, Reagan's mom, that is, Nick Searcy as James Bacon, Kevin Sorbo as his pastor. These folks have been outspoken conservatives in this era of Hollywood cancel culture, let's just call it, ever since #MeToo. Was it bad for business when you wanted to market the movie to have all of these?
Well, you mentioned our more conservative ones, but we also had a good chunk of the other opposite party as well. So it was. I mean, what I was really proud of with our movie was, in spite of this diverse cast, but on the other side, I would wake up one morning on the set and they'd be like, okay, Jon Voight is out making a Trump video. Mark Moses has to fly to Montana to campaign for the Democratic candidate for the Senate. I mean, it was all over the map, honestly. And I thought, our team is here to make a movie. We have a job to do. We're all professionals. Everybody respects everybody's views. There was no weirdness on set or why do you believe that? And we're right in the middle of an election year, too, the 2020 election. But we all had a job to do, and we're adults, So, there was none of that weirdness. But I would say our cast is probably half and half, maybe. Sometimes I get surprised, and I've never asked anybody their political affiliation, but I certainly would never not hire somebody because they're a conservative. I mean, that's just bizarre. I want the best person, and so
good for you.
Whether it's Dennis or with Jon Voight, I did tell Jon. I said, Jon, this is going to be the greatest acting stretch of your career for you to play a communist, like for Hollywood's biggest right winger to play a communist. That takes acting chops, right?
That's right.
And he would say, well, I'm not really a communist. I said, well, you're borderline communist, ex-communist, But he's the best, He's an Oscar winner.
Everybody did such a great job, I know. But these are symbols now of free speech in your movie, and it's ironic because Howie told me he wrote the script 18 years ago or so. That book is actually, I showed you the dog ears. It's pretty old,
right?
But the timing of 2024.
Yep.
Couldn't have been more perfect because I can't say it got Trump elected, but I'll say it moved the needle because it reminded everybody of what a real American hero is, what a real Republican conservative was like, what the Cold War stakes were. The movie did all that, and God bless it, in God's timing, it came out in 2024, sometime around September, October, and the election was in November, and he won.
Well, Dennis and I used to say, let's make sure this doesn't come out in an election year. Because, we want as many moviegoers as possible. And if it's an election year, Democrats may stay home or whatever. Sure enough, just the way I wish I did not plan this. None of us planned this. But we had COVID delays. We had actors strike. even the war between Russia and Ukraine hit us because a lot of our people we planned to work with on special effects were Russian, maybe even some Ukrainians. So we had to stop all those people immediately and then go back to the drawing board, hire new people. So all these delays just kept hitting us. I was the one thing that I did watch, I was carefully monitoring the polling data of are you willing to come back to a theater? And it was way too high for the longest time. So once that got down to a normal number of like 8%. But yeah, we did not, that was happenstance or the great scheduler in the sky, but not my genius to release it in the middle of an election year because I could see people saying, I'm not going to go, or, so-and-so Quaid is supporting Trump, so I'm going to skip this movie. It's like, hate to lose people like that, but it came out when it was supposed to come out, I guess.
It's their choice. And actually, that leads me to my next thing. So Howie was here.
Yeah.
The screenwriter, he told me the movie had the biggest divergence. So make history. Okay,
true.
You know where I'm going with this.
I'm waiting for my Guinness World Book of Records award. I've been in close contact with them, and I hope they do the right thing because it is clearly at 80 points. The 98 is the film goer score at Rotten Tomatoes. 18
the popcorn meter, 98%, which is 5,000 reviewers. 18% tomato meters on 68 reviews. That's darn near infringement of your rights to do business. I mean, they it was an awesome movie to see. So trust the popcorn meter, folks. But well, what do you think of this era of Yelp or Rotten Tomatoes being the arbiter of what's good or bad in a movie, and then something like this so clearly, obviously not true? If the fans are 98%.
Yeah, people are smart. They know what's going on there. I don't even have to say anything about it. You know exactly what's happening there. But what I did discover, which is a little disturbing, if it was Trump, he'd probably say it was rigged. I asked, because I just out of my own curiosity, like I usually shoot for 49 on Rotten Tomatoes for any movie that I do, because that was the score of The Passion. I figure that's a great movie that's being punished for other reasons. Right. So 49 is really like 100.
Yeah. Well, you just made my point, the religious versus the Republican.
So I just began to noodle around because there are some very religious sites that review movies. The ones that spring to mind are Movie Guide, Plugged In, which is focused on the family, has a movie site. They've got millions of viewers. They are not allowed to review because of their policies on LGBT issues. So they're not given certain Rotten Tomato certification. And they were informed about that. One of them told me. So interesting. I mean, to be punished because you have views that are divergent on a certain issue and you can't be a movie reviewer, that's kind of bizarre. So you've got Hank in his mother's basement in Cleveland, who has 3 viewers on his YouTube channel. He's certified, but Plugged In is not certified. So there's things like that.
It's a rigged game for sure.
Yeah, but it's
Did it make it hard to find distributors?
No, because that came later too, by the way. But I
just looked yesterday. It's still 98 to 18.
It's 98, yeah. And we didn't send people there. We didn't rig it. It's literally the voice of the people. This may be one of all the films that I've known of, this may be the greatest just cultural divergence. It's like, are you guys watching the same thing? I did have 2 interesting things happen. I noticed one reviewer left after 20 minutes and still reviewed the film. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So literally left. And another one was like on his way into the theater, he was tweeting out, nasty things like, I hope nobody thinks just because I'm going to this movie that I like it. So he's already made up his mind.
I'll bet you of those 68, there's a good number, 40 or so, that never saw it because they couldn't stand 2 hours of Reagan. They just made it up.
Yeah, and I would say what saddens me about that is that we early on, my director was John Avildsen, who directed Rocky. John was going to work with us on it. He's 81 years old, a Democrat, but he used to say he passed away pretty quickly of cancer. But he used to say, "Don't forget that Rocky was not about boxing. It just happened to be his job. It's really the story of the man." And he goes, in the same way, Reagan. The politics will be there, but it's incidental. It's really about the man.
Totally. And
all that he has to overcome and being washed up at 50. And so I think people just, the word hagiography comes out only in cases like this. Like the Michael Jackson movie that's coming up will never be called hagiography because even though it's really, it's not a full biography. But it's like they couldn't see this for what it was, which is just a story of a man. They had to think, well, why didn't you talk about that policy or this policy or that failure? It's like, guys, this is the story of the man.
Of his time.
Yeah. And
like Rocky.
We don't hide from any of the stuff. I have an entire minute of hating on Reagan with all the protesters. And by the way, I got the song Land of Confusion by Genesis for that section. And, the Genesis guys wrote that song because they're not fans of Reagan. And there was some pushback from our music supervisor.
They're British, so who cares?
Yeah. And I said, well, go back and tell them, like, we have an entire minute of Reagan hate, and the song's going to be there. And so you get paid and you get to do the Reagan hate. This is why you wrote the song.
Yeah.
So they said, okay.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's how we got the song.
So I thought Penelope Ann Miller was Oscar-worthy myself. I'm not an Oscar member, but I think she did win a 2024 winner for Family Film Award, Outstanding Performance in a Historical Drama. Penelope Ann Miller is Nancy. Even the awards have taken sides, unfair to their own people. Penelope has been in entertainment since Guiding Light in 1984, 40 years. Reagan was president, actually, at the time, 81 to 89. So do you think she was overlooked?
You think? I have read that there are 3,000 new Oscar non-American voters. So that would explain things like that.
Don't they have their own foreign award?
Well, that's the Golden Globe.
Yeah.
This is the Oscars that has opened up to a very large non-American contingent.
Okay.
So I wouldn't expect a voter from France to acknowledge that performance.
And of course, Dennis Quaid. I mean, he and his brother, very outspoken. He deserved an award. Nope, he got a Razzie, which is rude. That even
nominated
exists.
for a Razzie.
Yeah, right.
None of us
you
won
and Dennis
the Razzie,
you were nominated for that
unfortunately.
too. John Voight won it for the worst supporting actor. Totally unjust.
Well, for 4 other movies though, but all the movies that he did that year, he's being punished for Megalopolis and poor John.
Yours was best of 2024.
Yes,
No question about it.
yes,
I mean,
yes,
what was there?
very
Oppenheimer, American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Killers of the Flower Moon, whatever that is, Holdovers, Barbie, yeah, right. Poor Things, Maestro, Zone of Interest, films I never heard of, much less saw. 10 nominees and not Reagan.
Right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know how to say this politely, but a lot of my friends get up dreaming about Oscars, and it just doesn't even cross my mind.
They've jumped the shark.
I would never say no to an award if you want to give me an award, but it just doesn't matter. Box office is far more important, and I wonder if we're passing past that era of people caring, just because it is.
Well, as a marketing guy, it's nice to have the little Oscar on your DVD sales, right? Like that's how Ivory's did it with Weinstein when he was still available. But you don't care.
I just don't think it matters to me. But honestly, a lot of the things that people in Hollywood think matter, I don't think they matter. Like I don't think most, think of your relative in Arkansas. Do they get up in the morning and go, where's that new film from Darren Aronofsky? Like, they don't even know who Darren Aronofsky is or care who he is. And so I think it's really overrated. I wanted Sean because he's a great director. But the things that, are you going to have so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so? I was like, people just don't care. Right. It's a really small subset of people that...
It had to be Quaid. He looked exactly... Yeah. It had to be Quaid last year, not 10 years ago. He looked exactly like... Everyone's All-American, but like Ronald Reagan. He nailed it. I loved it. Has it had any repercussions, like for Sean McNamara or you, for future projects? What should be a launch pad for more films hit by cancel culture of the left or no?
No, not at all. It's opened up great doors. So awesome. In our case, we had a person at Universal really high up who really wanted the picture for Universal theatrical. But they were overruled by the head boss, who's a European person, so didn't understand America, whatever. But once it became a hit on the box office, then they said, go and get the rights to the rest of the world. So then we gave Universal the rest of the world. So that's an example of, I think we proved ourselves and what we can do. Then Lionsgate picked up for domestic ancillary. So it's kind of a combination of Showbiz, our distributor, Lionsgate, and Universal. And they've just said for the future, come back to us and let us know what you want to do next. So Hollywood does respect the box office. Everybody does. It's a business. So, we just have a way of doing things that's a little bit different. We didn't do a film festival circuit. Like, what would be the point of that? I want the film to be criticized the opening weekend, not a year before.
Although it could have done like Last Temptation of Christ, where the nuns come out and protest, and then people say, "Oh, there must be something I should go see there."
Right. Yeah,
and you know, Francis Ford Coppola, he's the one who won the 2025 Razzie, which is crazy. Jerry Seinfeld beat Quaid for actor, I guess worst actor.
Shoot.
But these are legends of Hollywood. How can the industry eat its own like that when the goal is to sell as many tickets to eyeballs as humanly possible? Why would they? Coppola, Quaid, Seinfeld, these are big-time stars.
I don't know how to answer for Quaid and Coppola. Coppola released a statement, about the whole thing. He was a little upset. Or was he upset? I think he was upset about it a little bit.
Probably
peeved. For us, honestly, we just love it. And actually, I was a little bit concerned because the New York Times review of Reagan was a little too positive. It made me a little bit nervous. The New York Times loved it. I may be doing something wrong. It was kind of borderline fresh. And so it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? But we got a nice review from the Village Voice, which is surprising. So there is some open-mindedness. I don't know. I think I'm 57, and I feel like Gen X is a little less ideologically driven, a little bit more practical. And if something is good, it's good. Yeah. We don't have to agree with it. But I think the older generation is still in control of some of this stuff. Yeah.
I came out of the theater talking to young people. They said, I didn't know that. I didn't know the world was on the brink. I was like, now you do. So like it's been a story that's been...
And I really, we made an effort. That's why when I read the hagiography stuff, I'm like, are you guys watching the same movie? Because in my movie, he gets dumped by his girlfriend, dumped by his wife. He's washed up at 50. It's literally the Rocky story. This is not hagiography. I mean, it's there for the world to see. I've got an entire minute of literally every protester you can imagine. So people just have a lens, and they just can't see past their own biases.
Yeah, it definitely makes the climax so much more poignant that he overcame so much to be the man of the moment. And I saw the movie, and I was surprised when I heard, da-da-da, up comes Guns N' Roses. That was my favorite 80s band. I remember when Arnold told Cameron to put that into T2,
right.
But it was so expensive, and those were like low-budget movies. Prior to that, music was pretty lame in action movies because of budgets. Tell us about the integration of great soundtracks with great movies, maybe since Top Gun or Dirty Dancing, also 80s.
Well, we wanted a song that really exemplified that period as the wall came down, and so I thought, man, that's the song, right? Is Sweet Child of Mine. And I have other musical stories too. I'm in town for we had an album release
of the
party.
Scorpions, but that was a German
we thought about that. Yeah, we thought about the one that was too on the nose was Right Here, Right Now, Jesus Jones. That would have been too much. We were watching the world wake up from history.
Sure.
But I was in town last night for our album release party for the two soundtracks, and I had Phil Keggy, who's a guitar wizard, play that lick in the movie. But yeah, we got the rights to the song. And then I just thought, it'd be fun to have Phil do it. I've written previous books, as you know, on rock and roll and religion. And Phil Keggy is, to me, the embodiment of the person who got left behind because of our ridiculous separation in pop culture of the religious from the rest of us. And I think it was Ted Nugent who said about Phil, what happened to that Phil Keggy? He could have saved the world with his guitar. Well, because he was religious and a Christian, he got shuffled off into Christian rock, and nobody ever heard from him again for pop culture. But he's this guitar wizard that people who play the guitar know this guy is amazing. He's missing his middle finger, and he plays with... Anyway, so I said, Phil, I want you to come and do that Slash's guitar lick and teach Slash how it should have been done. So Phil did it, and then he played it last night for me live. And but it's that song embodies that era to me.
It does.
Just before grunge kind of takes over everything, we had one last rock and roll band.
Yeah, it was like a last gasp of the Rolling Stones' early days.
That's right.
It was perfect. Scott Stapp, he played Frank Sinatra, small role in the movie. Could have used Creed. Maybe.
We made SNL because of that Stapp thing. The real story with that was I had 4 of my rock star pals, and I wanted to play Soviet generals at the table. So it was going to be Alice Cooper, Stapp, Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, and Gary Sharon, who was with Van Halen and Extreme.
Oh, wow.
So I was going to have them be the Soviet generals. But when time came, Alice got COVID. Eddie Van Halen had just died, so Gary just couldn't make the trip. And then Dave, I had a mix-up with his manager. Anyway, ended up being Stapp. So people were like, there was actually a bigger story at one point. But
he lives here now. He's on my list. Hey, if you're watching, Scott, come on the show.
There you go. But he played, the nightclub singer, and then we thought, well, Sinatra sounds better than nightclub singer, so.
He did a good job.
Yeah.
Do you think they did a good job shutting down the buzz behind Reagan? Box Office Mojo said $30 million. Was that profitable, or did it break even?
Yeah, I mean, we have fun and joke about it, but the seriousness was with Facebook. That was a real problem. They did, and this became public at the time. Newsweek picked up on it, different publications picked up on it. They did 4 things. They refused to accept our advertising. They suspended our account. We had fans who were not allowed to share information about the movie, so we have this all documented. I mean, it's very serious. If you can't transact,
I mean, you're a business, they're a business. They're infringing on your right to do business.
Well, they're infringing on our right to give them money. We're trying to give them money.
It's like discrimination.
It got so bad that Dennis went on Joe Rogan to talk about the censorship. We then took that clip and tried to advertise it, and were disallowed from advertising it on Facebook. The clip talking about the censorship. So it's almost like a parody.
Yeah.
They need to they need to clean up their act. That's not cool.
It's part of the what we're talking about here. 2,770 theaters. Is that a good number, or maybe too expensive these days using the theater system, and maybe streaming will be more profitable? How does it work?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is people will go for a very special movie. They're just not going to go, like in the old days, like in the 80s or 90s, they'd be like, oh, what's the latest Julia Roberts movie? Oh, let's just go watch it. I think that's kind of gone. It's got to be something like Tom Cruise, something, one of his movies, or something that people really feel that they can't wait 6 weeks to watch it at home. Now, in our case, I had a lot of people anecdotally say, I can't wait to watch a movie when it comes to my house. And I was like, oh, okay.
You can't see that nuclear launch dream sequence on a small screen.
On a small screen. But see, they have big screens now. That's the thing.
That's true.
And their grandkids have taught them how to use the remote and how to buy a movie now. And because of COVID. So I'm still not quite sure what's going on, but I know that anecdotally we had a lot of that happening.
Okay.
They know how to do it. They know how to, and they've got a great home system. And,
But there is a bottleneck there. It's Amazon, Hulu, or I guess Paramount Plus, or there's a fourth one that you kind of have to, if you can't go through them to stream, you can't go through anyone. So do those 4 being politically active in the last, like Facebook, say, nah, we don't want it?
Well, Starz Channel has our movie for the next 18 months, but it's not on there anymore. So
there you go. So they have it and they shelved it.
Okay, if you say so.
Oh, that's not nice at all.
But you can buy it at Amazon and iTunes. So.
You can buy it, yes, which everyone should. Right. But it would be nice if it was part of the rotation to see Mission Impossible 9 and Reagan. I noticed
and on American Airlines as well. So if
you go
fly somewhere, you can watch it.
Somewhere more than 2 hours away.
Right.
I noticed 0.2% of the gross was international.
Yeah.
Wouldn't Reagan sell well in Israel and Poland because of Pope John Paul, and maybe UK because of Thatcher?
Yeah, I think that's a decision primarily on Universal's part to release it digitally everywhere and not theatrically. I have heard that President Trump has affected things like that internationally, that movies like ours, there's less of an appetite for it. But yeah, that's really a universal call. It was released initially by Voltage in about 10 markets in Eastern Europe. Yeah, that's I think that's part of what we're dealing with in a post-COVID world is things go digital like that.
Yeah. So Quaid will probably be forever remembered as Reagan, even though he did many iconic roles prior. But you also did Ray. Love that movie. Jamie Foxx owned that character. I remember hearing him on TV quote like, hey, somebody had to actually sit him down and say, you're doing this man's life, do it right.
Right.
And it made him a better actor. And you did the beloved C.S. Lewis book, Narnia.
Yeah.
How do you choose what projects to produce?
Yeah, I didn't produce those, but I was working for the company that produced them. So just a small distinction. But I was very involved. In the case of Ray, again, I'm foreign born, even though my parents are Americans. I grew up in Japan. And so I looked at American pop culture from afar, and it's like America has so many rich, interesting characters in our history. Babe Ruth and Charles Lindbergh and Ronald Reagan and FDR and Hank Aaron. I mean, it's just so many great people who've done so many interesting things.
Jackie Robinson.
Yeah, and Ray Charles. And so Yeah, I just think there's so many great stories to tell. And again, what I'm very thankful for as a person who, reads the Bible, I'm so thankful that God chose to allow all the faults of our great heroes of the Bible. When you think about it, like, really, these guys are our heroes?
Yeah,
like
David
Moses
was not a
is
good
killing.
yeah.
Moses is killing a dude. David's having his neighbor's husband off so he can make it with the neighbor woman. It's like, but these are our heroes, but they're so real.
Yeah.
And, if I were starting a religion and writing a book, I would make everybody perfect, right? Because you want the religion to look good. Well, it's just the opposite. God purposely allows all these people to have such flaws. So first it gives us hope. Okay, I'm not as bad as him. I haven't killed anybody or killed my neighbor's husband. But it also just is a guidebook, I think, for us and how we should tell our stories. That even, again, with Reagan, it's like I couldn't find dirt per se on him. He was a good guy. But the dirt was that he had a lot of failure in his life, and he had a lot of setbacks and a lot of things to overcome.
Yeah.
And
he wasn't the perfect Republican either. I mean, he got the liability waiver for vaccines. He was able to get abortion legalized. He did an amnesty for illegals, things we're freaking out about now. So he wasn't perfect. And like he said, he was divorced, so he wasn't even a perfect religious man. Came from a broken home, but he was the man of the times who could work with a Margaret Thatcher, who could work with a Pope John Paul to literally liberate Eastern Europe.
Yeah, he was really haunted by that abortion decision as governor. That really stayed with him for his entire presidency. And he said it was the greatest regret of his political life, was that, of all the things he did or didn't do. But he tended to be trusting of... in our movie, the character, every movie has to have character development. In our movie, it's the moment on the airplane with Nancy when he really goes from being his optimistic mother's son to his more realistic wife's husband. Because amnesty is a good example. He allowed for 3 million illegals to be legalized in exchange for the border closing. Well, the border never shut down, so much for that deal.
Tip O'Neill.
In the case of the abortion thing, it was explained to him that this would allow for abortion for the health of the mother. Well, he trusted the definition of the word health, which later became, I have a toothache.
Yeah.
So he watched that happen to him over and over and over again. And so really it's after in that airplane where she says to him, they are going to take you down on Iran-Contra.
Which is fascinating. So he goes from a compromiser, so to speak, or a trusting of the other side to like, we win, they lose.
Yeah, and then he goes to Reykjavik and walks away from the deal. So that's part of his character arc. Not that he was a softie, but he tended to be trusting. The fellows are now going to work out a deal. Well, the fellows may not always be honoring their side of the bargain, so you better be ready for that.
More times than not. In the movie Wag the Dog, legendary actor Dustin Hoffman plays a producer, and when things go wrong, starts demanding credit. I want to credit. Is that a good portrayal of a Hollywood producer, kind of a closeted actor looking for fame, or honestly looking for just good art to be made and get up on the screen?
Yeah, there's I watched Narnia happen, and a lot of people took credit for it that had very little to do with it. So it is. It's ironic that you should ask that, because Reagan used to say there's no limit to what a man can do as long as he doesn't mind who gets the credit. But I found in Hollywood it's very destructive if you don't protect those issues. So I wanted to make sure that my friend Howie got sole credit for writing it, for instance, even though we all made contributions and whatever. But director, producer, writer. Because what happens in Hollywood today is a movie will have 45 producers.
Yeah.
And at that point, you just don't know who's responsible for what. So it is important to guard that and try to be as accurate as possible. So because otherwise, what happens is people go on to make movies and try to replicate what they didn't do the first time. Okay. So yeah, I'm a little bit of a stickler on that as much as possible.
Credit where it's due.
Yeah. Not to exaggerate, but not to. I just it can be destructive. I call it the Ringo Starr syndrome. So imagine the Beatles have their first record, and then Ringo Starr goes to investors and says, "Well, I'm kind of the reason for the Beatles. I'm going to make a solo album now." And they give him all kinds of money. Of course, he can't He can't replicate the Beatles. Well, then George comes and does it. By the time you get to Paul and John, nobody's going to invest anymore. But it is important that people know, what people did.
Yeah, that's a great example. You produced the Inspired by soundtrack for The Passion of the Christ and the Star Spangled Banner, featuring Dave Mustaine of Megadeth for the film America, and you've worked with artists like Lauryn Hill, P.O.D., Sixpence None the Richer, ZZ Top, Scott Stapp we talked about, Kirk Franklin, and many more. I think you did you have a label called Bully Pulpit Records, and you partnered with Network Music Group for the release of Molly Jensen's record, Maybe Tomorrow, in 2009. Do you like working with musicians or actors more?
Oh, that's a great question. I think they're very similar in a lot of ways.
A lot of actors want to be singers, and a lot of singers want to be actors.
That's right. Yeah, we have some really great soundtracks coming out on Curb Records this month in August. One is songs inspired by the movie. So I basically went out to a bunch of artists and said, watch the movie, and then I'd love to have you write a song afterwards, or read the script, either one. So that's like, Tanya Tucker and Travis Tritt and, Lee Greenwood. I've talked about Lee Greenwood in a second, but a lot of great artists that wrote those for us. And then the other is the songs in the movie itself. But yeah, no, it's I did the same. So I did the same thing for The Passion I did for Reagan. To answer your question, with The Passion, I remember Lauryn Hill. She loved the Passion movie and turned in a 10-minute song that she wrote in the theater. And so the label said to me, "We need 5 minutes." And I said, "Well, you can tell her." And they said, "No, you're the producer. You have to tell her." So I had to go to Ms. Hill. I call her Ms. Hill, and I said, "How am I going to pull this off? How do I tell a Grammy award-winning artist that I want half of her song?" So I said to Ms. Hill, can we get a shorter version of the song? And she said, "Well, how short?" I said, "Half." And expecting to be screamed at, and she said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, when do you think you have it?" She says, "No, you can do it." I said, "Okay." Okay, so so that was nice. Was what I expected, but yeah, it's just fun. It's just fun to work with artists. I love to see how they're going to react to a movie. They pick out different parts. Kathy Lee Gifford picked out the love story aspect and wrote a beautiful love song. The Commodores, the legendary Commodores, watched it and again wrote a love song about Ron and Nancy. Tanya's is very different. The song is called "Do We Want to Fight or Do We Want to Win?" About the political tensions. And then with Lee Greenwood, so this is an odd story.
Lee's been
Mike Curb, we're on Curb Records.
Yep.
One day Mike tells me, Reagan and I wrote a couple of songs together. And I said, "Excuse me?" And he says, "Yeah, we wrote a couple of songs together." I said, "Well, they've been released?" And he says, "No, they've never been released. They're just demos." And I said, "Well, let me hear them." So he sent them over, and one of them I said, "Let me send this to Lee Greenwood. Let's have Lee finish the song, rewrite some lyrics, and record it." So that's what we did.
Wow.
So the song is called, Lee played it last night, actually. And it's about, it's called "We Can Start the World Over Again" is the title.
Wow.
And it's an old, I think, John Winthrop thing of, can we start the world over again? Or Thomas Paine, start the world over again. So Ronald Reagan, 50 years after he wrote the song, it's going to come out this month.
That's amazing.
And, Ronald Reagan, the songwriter. So that's another
his next movie. Okay.
Yeah.
So your books include The Lion, the Professor, and the Movies, Narnia's Journey to the Big Screen. We've got now Making Reagan, so similar, but this new movie. Do you enjoy authorship?
Not really. I think it's sort of
lonely, right?
Yeah, like when my wife gives birth. I don't think she enjoys the 9 months, the process. But once the kid's born, it's like, "Oh, we're so glad you're here." I think that's how I feel toward books as well. I'll sit in a Starbucks, or I'll write at my office or at home or on a trip. But it's not particularly enjoyable, but it's almost like it's something I need to do. And then once it's out, I'm happy about it. But yeah, this one I wrote over I would have people tell me along the way, the movie sounds interesting, but your story of making this sounds even more interesting. So I thought, okay. So that's how I wrote the book.
Was it as hard to get C.S. Lewis Christian books onto the screen like Reagan?
Yeah. I think there was a lot of battles that went on the Narnia books. Doug Gresham, C.S. Lewis's stepson, was the one who kind of fought hard to keep the values. But we had a director that was not terribly happy about elements of the book. I think he thought there were some sexist things in the books of girls not being able to fight in battle, and he wanted to change that. So things that go on. And I the first draft of the Narnia script I got, the kids were cussing at each other, like dropping the F-bomb, and I was like, guys, we can't have these sweet British children in 1944 like dropping the F-bomb with each other. It just doesn't work.
C.S. Lewis's creations.
And they were just very cynical too.
Trying to be Twilight.
So I was able to, be a positive influence. I remember I wrote in the margins, have we lost our minds? We cannot have these sweet kids. Like, these are not kids from the San Fernando Valley in the 80s. These are like 40 British kids in the 40s.
It's not Goonies. It's not trying to make 80s Goonies.
So there is a bizarre desire to contemporize things and make them cool.
Are you able to talk about Tolkien and Lewis?
Yeah, that one never got off the ground. I'm so disappointed. I hope it will someday. But we made an announcement and had a team, and there was an Australian production. And they just that
sounds like it needs to be made.
Yeah, there's a lot of films that.
What is next for you that we might see soon?
I have a couple of rock stars that I want to do their stories and give them the Ronald Reagan treatment. And so I can't wait to talk to you about that. I'll come back on and talk to you all about it. But that's what I'm thinking about next. Again, we have heroes in every genre.
Do you wait for them to pass away like Ozzy Osbourne, or are they still alive?
No. I want to work with them and help tell their story. And
I love the Elvis one. I love the Queen one. So I'm sure you'll do it.
The Elvis one is interesting. I think that it just didn't work for his fans, like the 75-year-old, the 80-year-olds. But I think it worked for like the Justin Bieber generation and up and up. But I think the
Baz Luhrmann.
I think the 80-year-olds are going, what's going on here? What, so many colors and textures and storylines, but I think for the younger audience, it was like introducing Elvis.
When they were kids and Elvis was coming out, it was disorienting for the older people. So it's kind of a good thing.
Exactly. That's a great point, actually.
So a few minutes left. Robert Ebert has a website. RogerEbert.com.
Yeah.
So RogerEbert.com and he has a reviewer, Nell Minow.
Yes.
He has since passed away, Roger, but I don't think Roger would have agreed with Nell, his reporter, but she gave it a 1 star, and I want to give you a chance to react to this.
Sure.
Quaid captures Reagan's affability and cadences, and the scenes with Miller, Penelope Ann, have a believable sense of their devotion and partnership. But the movie overplays his ability and achievements and overlooks several other failures entirely. Reagan's response to Iran-Contra, like his deadly neglect of a child's pet fish, is essentially oops. It comes so close to parody that it brings to mind the Saturday Night Live Mastermind skit starring Phil Hartman as a secretly super intelligent Reagan. There's a lot to explore in examining Reagan's presidency, currently 16th in the 2024 Presidential Greatness Project excerpt survey's ranking. We could use much more insight into what made him the great communicator, but this movie is a poor communicator about the history and the man. I disagree with her, but Saturday Night Live did have a tendency to define our Republican presidents like Ford and Bush as bumbling fools. But what do you think? I disagree with her, like I said, but do you think more insight into his communication skills would have made it a better movie?
Yeah, I think that's a classic case of she wants a different kind of movie. She really, like the Lincoln movie, for instance, really should have been called How Abraham Lincoln Passed the 14th Amendment. I think it was the 14th Amendment. It really shouldn't be called Lincoln. So I kind of disagree with the notion that you tell a story by telling us two weeks in somebody's life, like Frost Nixon or whatever. So yeah, we're not going to get into the depths of issues of his presidency in a biopic that spans 75 years. It's not possible.
Yeah.
But I went to film school. I know the rules. I purposely violate the rules. I just don't believe that I can understand somebody by this narrow window. And so what may suffer is an in-depth analysis of the presidency.
Yeah. It's not the History Channel, it's the movies.
Yeah, there's plenty of those documentaries, and you can watch. There's plenty of critical documentaries of Reagan that you can watch.
I went to film school too, and I always say if you're going to be critical of a movie, go make your own. Like, don't do that to his.
Well, the critics are there for a reason, but like Iran-Contra, she picks on that as an example. we didn't shy away from the fact. We leave the interpretation of the viewer of did he really know or did he not know? That's really unknowable. So we leave that up. That's up for you to decide. But
Go talk to
I think
Ollie
the
North
key
about
point,
that.
the key point with Iran-Contra that is, by the way, is different from the Trump era. The Trump era is deny, 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 no matter what. I mean, think about when Herschel Walker ran for the Senate. Like she produced the greeting card where he's like giving her a check and saying, "Hope you get over your abortion" or whatever it was. Like we know he did it.
Yeah,
just cop to it. Yeah, it's okay. Just cop to say, you know what? I was young and foolish. I shouldn't have paid for that abortion. Just deal with it. But it's still deny, deny, deny. With Reagan, it's like, yeah, you know what? Yeah. That's the lesson we learned from Nixon was cover up is worse than the crime. Just cop to it.
A failed guy, yeah.
Yeah, so Reagan copped to it on Iran-Contra.
I also disagree with her, not hers, but the Presidential Greatness Survey. I'd have Ronald Reagan in the top 5. You think Time and movies like yours will improve his standing? 16
I think
is
he'd be in the
low.
top. I think he'd be with, Kennedy. Well, FDR, certainly. I think it's FDR, Washington, Lincoln, Reagan, JFK, maybe not.
Too short.
Yeah. Who would be the other ones? I think those are maybe some of the early ones, like an Adams or a Jefferson. But I think those are the consequential ones. I mean,
I'd like to see him on Mount Rushmore. I mean,
I think he's objectively, I think Trump is accomplishing things that Reagan couldn't get around to doing, couldn't accomplish. Very different characters, obviously. One is a New Yorker who fought the mob and the unions and whatever, and Reagan's more of a polite Midwesterner. So you have different styles. But Trump, there's no Reagan had people around him who would say, "You can't do that, sir." Reagan wanted to recognize Taiwan. He wanted to get rid of
bring down the wall speech.
That's right. He wanted to get rid of the Department of Education, for instance. And somebody would say, a bureaucrat would come and say, "Sir, we can't do that." Trump doesn't have those bureaucrats around him, so there's no guardrails or nobody to stop him from doing something,
good and
for
bad.
better or for worse, right?
All right. So last question: politics versus music. Both, obviously, we all know politics is downstream from culture, so music is huge, just like movies. Your book, Rock and Roll Rebellion. Tell us about that, and did you enjoy the music topic more than politics topic? Because I remember very clearly we talked about Guns N' Roses. They were the biggest band in the universe. Knives came out for them. They said the GAY word, and it was over for them in terms of political culture in their Southern California rock industry. Politics and music. How did you tell us about that book?
I did 3 books, Rock and Roll Rebellion, Faith, God, and Rock, and Rock Gets Religion. Alice Cooper wrote the foreword to Rock Gets Religion because he really kind of exemplified the ability to have a religious experience and still stay in rock and roll. In the old days, you would have a whatever born-again experience, and then your pastor would say, cut your hair and sing hymns or whatever, and all your fans would lose you. Think about Cat Stevens. Even though he became a Muslim, we lost Cat Stevens, and he became Yusuf Islam and whatever. But so Alice goes to his preacher, a very wise man, and says, what do I do now? I've become a born-again Christian, but I'm Alice Cooper. And again, his pastor says to him, does God make mistakes? And he's like, well, I don't think so. I'm new at this, but I don't think so. He says, well, God made you to be Alice Cooper. So I want you to go out and be the most God-honoring Alice Cooper you can possibly be. And that's what he did. He didn't change his name to Vincent Fernier, back to his name, didn't take off the makeup, still does all the crazy stuff on stage, but his lyrics changed. And so I think that was kind of what my books were about, is that process. And look, we need a robust pop culture. Everybody gets to fight for their rights, right? The LGBT community and this community and that community. And for the Christians to just drop out and go, okay, you take over the culture, we'll just stay over here in our churches. But we need all the pushing and pulling and tugging, and that's how we kind of get to a semblance of normalcy, is everybody puts in their 2 cents and fights for what they believe in. Yeah. And when one side disappears, our culture suffers. And so that's why I think of Phil Keaggy. I think that our culture could have used, the 70s pop culture could have used his input.
And movies like Serpico and Look Who's Coming to Dinner, and Gone with the Wind, you go down the list, it's like change the culture with a good story and a good movie that everybody can rally around and say, that's an American story. And that's what Reagan was to me. And that's why I was so angry when I started seeing which I knew was going to happen, but I saw the left just come out and say, we're going to bury it. we're not going to say bad things about it. We're just not going to talk about it. It's going to disappear. And so
that is worse. To not talk about it is even worse.
Yeah.
So the negative
like
reviews
cruel.
are
It's like psychological cruelty.
That's right. I can live with the, but no, we're thankful for all the reviews, and every once in a while there's a surprise. Like I said, to have the Village Voice call it a superhero origin story and not be ironic or not be sarcastic, like that was pretty surprising. So every once in a while there's somebody that's fair, and I do feel like it's a generational thing too. I feel like our generation and younger, even in Hollywood, is less ideological, more practical. Is this gonna make money for us? Is it a good story? So I do feel like some of the ideology is the older crowd who are still fighting battles from 40 years ago that I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And I think let's just get on with life and let's everyone tell their stories and may the best story win. And that's the pop culture that I want to live in.
And with so many channels to choose from, it really has to be a drawing, engaging story, authentic story that will bring them in, or else they'll just tune it out. So, Mark,
we were thankful. The LA Times said it called us a sleeper hit. So I'll take sleeper or no sleeper. I'll take it. So,
18 years in the making, sleeper hit. These overnight sensations take a long time. Right. Steve Jobs said. Well, Mark, thank you for your time. Tell everyone where they can find out more about you, where they can stream the movie in the future. Stars apparently not the place.
Yeah, it may not be on Stars.
Your book? Where can they buy your book?
Yeah, the book is called Making Reagan, and Megan Kelly wrote the foreword for me. She is an old friend, and she came out to watch the movie early on. I'm proud of her podcast and what she's doing. And it's on Amazon, of course. And then, my website is markjoseph.com. And the film is on iTunes and Amazon. We hit #1 at iTunes, so that was great. We appreciate all the support that people around the country gave us. And, one day we'll be hopefully on Netflix or wherever. We'll see what happens after that 18-month window.
Yeah, well, the story is evergreen. It's not going away. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Sing a song about the heartland, the only place I feel at home. Sing about the way a good man works until the daylight's gone.
Oh, wasn't that a great conversation? And thanks for coming back. It's that time to remind everyone to please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. That's how we grow and keep this content free for you. Now, the Heartland Journal News. Bill Gates backs an Arizona-based startup that makes water out of thin air. Invented in 2014, the technology is already in use at about 450 project sites. Amelia Palia, interestingengineering.com. Bill Gates' breakthrough energy venture is one of the firms that is backing Scottsdale, Arizona-based Source Global, a startup that makes water out of thin air, CNBC reported. Not into wine, into water. Estimates from the World Health Organization suggest that roughly half the world's population will live in water-stressed areas in less than 3 years. While parts of Asia and Africa are known for their lack of access to drinking water, the U.S. need for a clean and continuous supply of drinking water cannot be understated. More than 1.5 million miles of lead pipes are still in use to tap into groundwater sources, while around 750 water main breaks are reported every day. So they're boiling water in California because a pipe just broke. Source Global's technology consists of renewable systems to obtain water practically anywhere on the planet. Invented in 2014 by Cody Friesen at Arizona State University in the U.S., the system is made up of a panel similar in appearance to solar panels, but different in that it produces water instead of energy. That said, part of the system does include solar panels that trap the energy from the sun to run the device and make it independent of power grids. The energy generated is used to power fans that draw in ambient air and push it into a water-absorbing material that traps the water vapor. Trapped water vapor is then extracted and passively condensed, after which it is collected. Minerals are then added to ensure that the water tastes properly. Not only is the water obtained in a sustainable manner, a single hydro panel used by Source can replicate 54,000 single-use plastic bottles during its 15-year lifespan, the company claims on its website. Source has already installed its panels at 450 project sites spread over 52 countries. and last year launched its own bottled water brand in Queensland, Australia. The company has now raised $150 million through venture capital firms like Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy, BlackRock, Duke Energy, and Lightsmith Group. CNBC said in its report how the company plans to use this investment has not been revealed. Butter, made from carbon, tastes like the real thing, gets backing from Bill Gates. A company in Batavia, Illinois is making butter in a way you've never seen before. No animals, no plants, no oils. This butter is made from carbon. The sustainability-focused approach has the blessing and backing of Bill Gates. It looks, smells, and tastes like the butter we all know, but it's made within the farmland. It's made without the farmland, fertilizers, or emissions tied to the typical process. This unprecedented process is happening at the faculties of Savor in an industrial park in the suburbs west of Chicago. So you're using this gas right now to cook your food, and we're proposing that we would like to first make your food with that gas, said Kathleen Alexander, co-founder and CEO of Savor. The company's pioneering tech uses carbon and hydrogen to make sticks of butter that anyone would recognize. This is pretty novel, to be able to make food that looks and tastes and feels exactly like dairy butter, but with no agriculture whatsoever, said Jordan Beaton Charles, food scientist for Savor, and without a long ingredient list the average person can't pronounce. It's really just our fat, some water, a little bit of lectin as an emulsifier, and some natural flavor and color, Beaton Charles said. This is how it works. Fats are made up of carbon and hydrogen chains. The goal is to replicate those chains without animals or plants, and they did it. To put it in simple terms, Savor says they take carbon dioxide from the air and hydrogen from water, heat them up, oxidize them, and get a final result that looks like candle wax, but is in fact fat molecules like those in beef, cheese, or vegetable oils. The entire process releases zero greenhouse gases, uses no farmland to feed cows, and despite its industrial appearance, has a significantly smaller footprint. In addition to the carbon footprint being much lower for process like this, right, the land footprint is like 1,000 times lower than what you need in traditional agriculture, Alexander said. And the most important question, how does it taste? The answer is surprisingly like the butter we know and love. The company also touts that they do not use any palm oil in the butter, and palm oil is a significant contributor to deforestation and climate change, they say. Of the 51 billion tons of greenhouse gas emitted every year, 7% is from the production of fats and oils from animals and plants, which Savor says makes the process the most climate-friendly option. Right now, the company is working directly with restaurants, bakeries, and food suppliers. They're releasing chocolates made with their butter in time for the 2025 holiday season. They expect for the average consumer to be able to buy them in the near future. Savor butter is either its current manifestation, or with our partners, we expect that to be on the shelves kind of more like around 2027, Alexander said. The teams in Batavia and their home lab based in San Jose, California, are backed by billionaire Gates, who wrote in his blog, "The idea of switching to lab-made fats and oils may seem strange at first, but their potential to significantly reduce our carbon footprint is immense," says the non-scientist, non-doctor, non-college graduate, Bill Gates. The company believes butter can make a difference. This is really about how we feed our species and heal our planet at the same time, Alexander said. Of course, make a buck or two. Rich man, poor farmer. Bill Gates buys up farmland while promoting fake meat. Of course he does. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates is buying up farmland, promoting lab-cultured meat alternatives, and telling people they should stop eating meat. Patrick Meagher, Farmers Forum. He is one of the richest men in the world. He's also the richest farmer. That's because Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates has been buying up farmland for years. His Red River Trust owns more than 275,000 acres of farmland spread across 18 states. He owns more farmland in the United States than anyone else. To get an idea of size, Gates owns more farmland than there is land in all of Prince Edward County, or compared with our smallest provinces. He owns farmland equivalent in size to 20% of Prince Edward Island. In his own words, Gates says he owns less than 1/4,000th of all the farmland in the United States. "I have invested in these farms to make them more productive and create more jobs," he told a Reddit online forum last year. "There isn't some grand scheme involved." He thinks you protest too much. He leases the land to farmers, but many people don't trust his intentions. They think there is a grand scheme. The first red flag is Gates's huge support for the World Economic Forum, which offers membership to global elites, to the wealthiest of wealthy, who are focused on protecting their control over the economy by pulling up the ladder to the attic of wealth so that no one else can climb up and achieve similar success. Another red flag is Gates's take on agriculture. It's creepy. Yes, he leases land for farmers like BlackRock, buying houses and renting them so that you will owe nothing, but he doesn't like conventional farming. Gates doesn't like people eating meat and famously told Technology Review in 2021, quote, "I do think all rich countries should move to 100% synthetic beef." Why not? He owns it. You can get used to the taste different, and the claim is they're going to make it taste even better over time. Of course, Gates has invested heavily in both plant-based meat imitations and lab-grown meat, which is easy to manipulate in all sorts of ways. His lab meat crusade thankfully hit a Florida roadblock: the farmers. They convinced their governor, Ron DeSantis, to ban the manufacturing, sale, and distribution of cultivated meat. Take your fake lab-grown meat elsewhere, DeSantis told a press conference on May 1, the day he signed the bill. We're not doing that in the state of Florida. While anyone who questions the mainstream media narrative is ridiculed and dissenting theories are called conspiracies, DeSantis is the breath of fresh air. He poked the global elitist storyline that runs deep in the news media because they own it. On this point, DeSantis is awesome. He said that Florida is taking action to stop the World Economic Forum's goal of forcing the world to eat lab-grown meat and insects. Well, let's just hope he can stop it from being in fast food and shipped in from other states. Up yours, globalists, this article goes on to say. Florida Commissioner of Agriculture Wilton Simpson added that lab-grown meat is a disgraceful attempt to undermine our proud tradition and prosperity and is in direct opposition to authentic agriculture. Exact objection to the Gates. Lab meat is created by taking stem cells from animal muscle tissue and putting them in a tank with nutrients and growth-promoting chemicals to help them multiply. Yum. The American Cancer Society also opposes lab meat, arguing that bioengineering meat could trigger an antibiotic resistance that could cause cancer. In 2023, Italy became the first country to ban synthetic meat. Good on you, Italy. U.S. historian, conservative political commentator, professor, and senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, Victor David Hanson, told the Heritage Foundation's Kevin Roberts Show on May 2 that Gates' philosophy is a danger to the world. He said that it is unnerving when you start to see people like Bill Gates gobble up farmland and you read what his foundation says about farming. When they say that we're going to have a particular type of agriculture, they want large block run by the government or by private consortiums where they say we're not going to have animal-based proteins, we're not going to have stockyards, we're not going to have turkey farms, we're not going to have chickens. Hansen, who grew up on a California farm and still lives there, added, the academic mind always has the answers, but never in the real world, and they do a lot of damage. Gates also has hundreds of millions of dollars invested in seed development, fertilizer, lab meat, plant-based meat alternatives, and insects. I just told you about butter and water, as well as vaccines and sterilization methods. He would like to see fewer people on the planet. Gates agrees with the World Economic Forum that the optimal size of the world's population is 1 billion, but we are 8 billion. Speaking recently to the Economic Club of Washington, D.C., Gates figures it might not be that complicated to reduce population. Oh my God, he thinks he's God. If we do a really great job of new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 to 15%, he said. That's just a drop of about 1 billion people, give or take a few hundred million. What a monster. I am not sure that I like an ultra-rich guy with an agenda ramping up farmland purchases while promoting synthetic lab meat and insects and simultaneously funding people curbing healthcare services. It's also pretty spooky. These are not just money-making ventures, the article says. They are the kind of things one might do if he wanted to actually control the food supply and world population. Whew, one more rich guy wanting to force feed us, so not to be outdone. FDA clears Wild Type's cell-cultivated salmon for U.S. debut. June 4th, 2025, Elaine Watson. San Francisco-based Wild Type will be the first company to launch cultivated seafood in the U.S. after securing an FDA no-questions letter regarding the safety of its cell-cultured salmon. Wild Type is the fourth cultivated protein producer to complete a U.S. pre-market scientific and safety consultation after Upside Foods, Good Meat, and Mission Barnes, and the third to have full approval to sell. Mission Barnes is still awaiting the final go-ahead from the USDA for its cultivated fat. It will debut its wares at the James Beard award-winning Haitian restaurant Con in Portland, Oregon on Thursday night in June, of course, Portland, then every day starting in July before expanding into 4 additional restaurants. The production process. In the U.S., cultivated meat and poultry is regulated by the FDA and USDA under a joint regulatory framework. For cultivated seafoods, however, the FDA has sole jurisdiction. In a letter to Wild Type dated May 28th, the FDA said it had no further questions regarding the startup's conclusion that its cultivated salmon is as safe as comparable food produced by other methods. According to a scientific memo published by the FDA on the same date, the cells used the established Wild Type cell lines were originally isolated from coho salmon from a Washington state hatchery at the fry stage of development shortly after the fish hatched from the egg. The mesenchymal cells, which are capable of dividing and developing into multiple cell types such as fat, muscle, and connective tissue cells, are adapted to grow in liquid suspension culture without having to attract to a surface. Wild Type does not include differentiation through changes in its media formulation, which contains fibroblast growth factor 2, but no longer features pricey media components listed in its original regulatory submission, such as insulin-like growth factor, albumin, and transferrin. Doesn't this make you hungry? Wild Type's achievement is a watershed moment for domestic seafood production and for the cultivated protein industry overall. The thoughtful, evidence-driven review proves that innovative food technologies meet the highest safety standards and can play a vital role in healthy American diets while strengthening our food system's domestic production and resilience. Dr. Susie Gerber, Executive Director, AMPS. The memo does not explain how Wild Type texturizes or shapes the harvested cells to create products that resemble raw salmon, but refers to post-harvest thermal processing, steps that serve to deactivate, denature any residual growth factors in the product. The total fat content and amino acid content is lower in the harvested cell material versus conventional coho salmon, which Wild Type says is likely due to the absence of protein-rich extracellular structures found in conventional salmon products created by God. Relative levels of minerals were similar, with modest decreases in the levels of iron, magnesium, potassium, and selenium in the harvested cell material. Wow, that's the whole reason to eat it. Founded in late 2016 by cardiologist Dr. Arye Elfenbein and Justin Kolbeck, a former diplomat, Wild Type is one of the better funded players in the nascent cultivated meat seafood segments, raising more than $123 million to date from backers including El Caterton, Leonardo DiCaprio, the actor, Bezos, Expeditions, Temasek, 2SG Investments, Robert Downey Jr.'s Footprint Coalition, and Cargill, the chemical company. Yum. Can't wait to see what's for dinner. That is it for this episode. Thank you, Mark Joseph, for sticking with it. 18 years to finally give Reagan his due in a feature-length film on the big screen movie. Screw the critics that get paid to criticize and go with the ticket-buying public willing to invest time and money into watching it. They liked it and did a fine job. I did too. Thanks for coming on the show and sharing your experience making it and giving your opinion of the industry and gatekeepers you have to navigate just to tell a story. Glad someone's willing to do it. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. See y'all next time. Peace in our time, and definitely, glory to God, stream the movie.
But I remember the story of a fellow who was running for office as a Republican, and he was in a rural area and it wasn't known to be Republican, and he stopped by a farm to do some campaigning. And when the farmer heard he was a Republican, his jaw dropped and he said, "Wait right here till I go get Ma. She's never seen a Republican before." So he got her, and the candidate looked around for a podium from which to give his speech, and the only thing he could find was a pile of that stuff that Bess Truman took 35 years trying to get Harry to call fertilizer. So he got up on the mound, and when they came back, he gave his speech. And at the end of it, the farmer said, "That's the first time I ever heard a Republican speech." And the candidate said, "That's the first time I've ever given a Republican speech from a Democratic platform."
I was a brand new KGB officer, given my first intelligence assignment. A certain actor and union leader.
Dutch, there's a purpose for your life.
You can run from a bully for so long, but after a while, you're gonna have to stand up to him.
There's about to be another war right here in Hollywood. The commies on one side, the mob on the other. And you're right in the middle, son.
Hello, I'm Nancy Davis.
Hello, Nancy Davis. I'm Ron Reagan.
I'm curious, Ron.
What would you say is the issue of our time?
No question about it. Communism and the Soviet Union.
It's you!
I'm running for governor, and I would like your vote.
I've forgotten your name. Do his initials help, or R? Honey, Roy Rogers is here! And he's running for governor!
Ronnie, remember when we met? You told me that you wanted to make a difference in this world. You know what you have to do.
Governor Reagan, again, typically is against such a proposal.
There you go again.
But he was not afraid to take us on.
There's nothing a retired governor can do about the Soviets, but a president. Now he can do a thing or two.
Welcome to your life.
I was a lifeguard on a river.
There's no turning back.
And I learned how to read the currents. Not just the ones on the surface, but also the ones deep underneath the water. I am about to start the biggest war of this century, and I'm not going to fire a single shot.
You're gonna blow up 8 years of diplomacy.
Well, if you think that got their undies in a wad, you just wait.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
What would you have me do?
I want you to fight!
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Wants to rule the world.
Yeah, I've been dreaming of the wild, wild plains, walking where the pine trees dance.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.